Hello, how you doing? I'm going to talk to you today about multiple wives. Now, there is a preacher on YouTube who has more than one wife, but let me say something about that. The Old Testament, God did allow it, and I think the reason why He allowed it is because, well, for the most part, women outnumbered men. I think that's what happened, and God did not want massive prostitution in Israel. He didn't, and so He allowed men to take on multiple wives. I don't think He did it so men could have super lust. That's not why he did it. But what God considers a husband is a verb. You know, a husband is a person, is a verb, something that you do. And also, he considers the husband a covering, to covering the wife and so on, protecting the wife. So God wanted to protect all the women of Israel. So he wanted to cover them, use a husband to cover them. So he allowed the men to have multiple wives as a covering for the women of Israel. So they won't go into prostitution. There won't be massive prostitution in Israel because women back in the day didn't have any kind of economic power. I don't even know if they had the rights of inheritance. They shouldn't have any kind of power. So he wanted to cover them by having multiple wives. Um, the other thing is that, he said in the beginning, man should leave his father and mother, cleaving to his wife. He didn't say you cleaving to your 4 wives or 5 wives. He said you cleaving to your wife singular. Now, in the New Testament, Jesus was having a discussion with the Pharisees about marriage and divorce and so on. And he said, one man, one wife. I remember because I read it. Now, I used to have an old Bible, it may still be in my archive somewhere, where it had the old language. And that's where I read that in the old language, because the Bible that I have now is kind of new. It has that new language. And so that's not in there, one man, one wife. But he did say that because I read it. Jesus said one man and one wife. He said you already have the law, thou shalt not steal, commit adultery, etc. And then he said, the next verse, he said one man and one wife. That's the one thing that he did change. And I definitely read that myself, but I read it in this Bible that had the old English translation in there. And he said, God is not like, he hates fornication, he hates adultery. Ephesians 5:3-5, he compares adultery and fornication to evil thoughts. Matthew 15:19, Matthew chapter 19, Mark chapter 7:22, and Mark 10:6-12, and Mark 10-19. He considers fornication, he said that's what defiles a man. Fornication and adultery defiles a man. Mark 7:20-22, and evil thoughts, Matthew 15-19. Okay, so that is in this dispensation. Okay, now that preacher who has multiple wives, maybe he has 3 total wives, and he has the first one that's been married to over 30 years. Now, see, he just does not even consider her feelings, how hurt she is, but he just want to get licked and laid, every week. That's why he has multiple wives, so he can get licked and laid every week. Let's get real for a minute. And so he uses the New Testament to justify his lust gone wild and gone crazy to have multiple wives. He twists the New Testament, the Old Testament. And he's not very well read on New Testament, because he would have read what Jesus said, one man, one wife. But he misuses that to justify his own lust for women in the church, for girlfriends. He probably has just as many or more girlfriends or mistresses. Okay, but he uses the Old Testament to justify his own sin. But when he comes before the judgment seat of Christ, God is going to accuse him of adultery and fornication. So that would be that. Bye.